first season of Devil May Cry on Netflix has officially been released, and boy oh boy do I have some things to say about it. If you followed me for a while, you'll know that Devil May Cry is my favorite video game series of all time. And by extension, I have been very excited for this new show since its first announcement all the way back in late 2018. I've been trying not to let the vocal minority of the Devil May Cry babies dull my excitement, while also attempting to keep my high expectations in check. But I couldn't help myself. I called into work and binged it all in one sitting on the day it released, with a watch party livestream here on YouTube, which was a ton of fun. I upgraded to a premium Netflix subscription for the first time to watch the show ad-free in 4K quality, and hell, I bought an $1,100 television with a $500 sound system to have the best viewing experience possible. I was locked and loaded and excited to have new and promising Devil May Cry content to look forward to. So, was Devil May Cry on Netflix worth the wait? Let's find out, shall we?
Let's dance.
Devil May Cry on Netflix follows Dante on his first big adventure as a demon hunter, where everyone and their mother, including Batman, is after his necklace, once it's discovered that it's part of a key that opens the gate to the underworld. We also have an organization run by Batman's character called Darkham, which includes demon hunter Mary Arkham, aka Lady, who has a massive hatred against demons. And the main villain of the first season, the White Rabbit, wants to open the gate to merge the human world with the demon world, known as Makai, while also having a personal vendetta in the narrative. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, I would like to remind everybody that I'm not by any means a professional anime reviewer, so my thoughts on the show should be viewed as someone who is keeping an open mind on a new adaptation of their favorite video game series, and is just expressing what they liked and disliked about the show. So starting off strong, the animation of the show, and the action scenes especially, are amazing. It's very fast-paced and very well choreographed, and is easily the best part of the first season. Beginning the show with a bunch of cool action scenes was a great way to engage the audience and hook us right away, especially because Devil May Cry is highly regarded for being one of the best hack-and-slash games on the market. And I think the highlight of the action can be seen in the entirety of episode 2, where Dante has to spend the entire episode fighting off a horde of armed mercenaries, with the additional challenge of having to do so without killing any of them. This leads to a lot of fun moments with Dante taunting his enemies and showing off just how fast and strong he is while he's at his peak, while also showcasing that he does have his limits, with Mary actually getting the upper hand in the latter half of the episode. This is something that's shown throughout the show in general, and when comparing it to the 2007 anime from Madhouse, I actually appreciated seeing a Dante that was still powerful, but not invincible. And on a quick side note, one of the things that this show does that we rarely see in the DMC series is Dante actually saving people. This happens a few times actually, and it was a really nice inclusion. Mary shares some great moments of action as well, and the addition of the rocket boots on her battle armor led to some pretty fun sequences where she's able to keep up with these high-level demons. And I wish the same could be said about her teammates though. These guys are the textbook definition of wasted potential. I audibly said out loud at the beginning of episode 4 that I was expecting none of them to survive by the end of the season, only for them all to die in the same episode. There's also a fair amount of set pieces that really kick the action into high gear. The highway chase from episode 3 in particular stands out because earlier in the episode, we see Darkham getting absolutely annihilated by 4 high-level demons, but then it has Dante fighting them all at once while riding a motorcycle, once again showcasing the stylish creativity of Dante's fighting style. This is one of the instances where the animation changes from 2D to 3D animation, and while it was noticeable, it's something that didn't bother me all too much. The way I saw it, the change to 3D animation was a way of showing how otherworldly the high-level demons were, and this helped distinguish them from the low-level demons. Although, I can't deny that it is something that took me out of the moment from time to time. Next, I'd like to talk briefly about the voice acting, because it is incredible here in the show, especially with Kevin Conroy delivering an amazing performance as Vice President William Baines. It was so fun seeing Kevin deliver a villainous performance. We got to see this a little bit in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and he pulls it off very well here for a new original character. He's going to be surely missed in the next season for sure, regardless of who they get to replace him. While I have some issues with how Lady was written that we'll discuss later on in the video, Scout Taylor Compton puts on a great voice for her. You can tell that she's very angry and determined in her mission, blindly following her orders and looking up to William Baines as long as she gets to kill demons. And this attitude, as well as the internal conflict that we see her go through in the arc of the show, is elevated greatly by Scout's performance. Hoon Lee voices the White Rabbit, and he plays a very tragic character who ends up going completely mad after his life is ruined, and his performance alone puts him up there as one of the best villains that we've seen in the entirety of the Devil May Cry universe. And I especially liked his monologue about his feelings towards Sparta, and how that decision affected both worlds differently. And now, we gotta talk about Johnny Young Bosch as Dante. I've been very mixed about this particular casting ever since it was first revealed. Not because I don't like Johnny as a voice actor, but because he already voices Nero, another character in the main series. Not to mention that Johnny's voice is pretty distinct already, so I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get as invested into this Dante because the voice would be too distracting. And unfortunately, even though Johnny kills it as Dante, there were many instances where it did distract me, especially in the action scenes where Dante is grunting. I remember Adi saying that there would be something in the show that explained why Johnny is voicing Dante, and I either missed the point entirely, or it hasn't been revealed yet. And if that's the case, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now let's discuss the music. The OST has a mixture of Noizia's DMC tracks and Tetsuya Shibata's guitar riffs from the original series, and I think it works very well for this universe by combining early 2000s techno music with garage band rock. Apartment, Shapeshifter, Mary, and Rooftop Chase were some of my favorite tracks to listen to, which can all be heard in the first 2 episodes. There's also a bunch of licensed music, which could be hit or miss depending on the context it's used for, and how many different licensed songs are included. I personally think that it appropriately fits not only the general vibes of the show and the series in general, but also the scenes they're included in. Except for the last one. I audibly laughed out loud when I heard it because it felt like such a meme. Other than that though, I thought it was awesome, especially the Rage Against the Machine and the Papa Roach sequences. And speaking of memes, there is another piece to the music that I need to address, and that's the music they included from the games. The OST was composed by Power Glove, and there are a few instances where a soft sung cover of a song from the games is used. Apparently this was a thing in the Castlevania anime as well, and I was hoping we would get music from the games, and I appreciated that instead of just dragging and dropping a song from the video game OSTs, they made covers of the songs in order to associate these particular versions with this new series. However, I think that the song choices were less than ideal. Out of the 3 songs that were used in the show, only one of them is from DMC3, and the other 2 are from DMC5, with an additional song using the same motif of Crimson Cloud, once again from DMC5. Now that's not to say that I didn't like hearing DMC5 music in the show, but the problem is that the songs that they used are themes specifically for the characters in the game they're associated with at the time. So the context is totally different in the show, and are used for more cheeky humor and references. For example, the first one that we have is when Bury the Light begins playing during the scene where Virgil appears to confront Dante. I thought it was subtle enough to where a fan of the games would get the cheeky reference without it being so in your face. And if I'm being honest, I didn't even hear it the first time I saw the scene online. And for those moments, I think it's perfectly fine, as long as they don't do it again. And with that being said, we got to address the elephant in the room. The number one thing that holds this show back, and has been the biggest talking point online, the writing. It is so bad. And when I'm talking about the writing, I don't necessarily mean the narrative itself, because I think this alternate take on the story as it's currently presented is totally fine. But the dialogue, man, the dialogue is not great. It's the kind of dialogue that barely leaves any room for piecing things together with context clues. And it is so annoying to listen to. Sometimes it doesn't do this, like when Plasma explains that he needs living tissue to morph into someone. So when we hear this, the average person can deduce that Virgil is alive, since Plasma used his form in the first episode, and will likely see him by the end of the first season. But in other instances, we get unnatural dialogue that's meant to explain something that we either already know or we should be able to deduce ourselves. Dante gets shot point blank in the chest with a shotgun, and as his organs are being put back together, it cuts to a first-person view of the guy who shot him, so Dante can audibly explain to the audience that he heals fast. There's a preceding joke that follows this that almost saves it, but I cringed really hard when I rewatched it. And I think Dante could have either made a better quip about how his jukebox was now broken and he had to pay for it, or just said nothing and smirked before cutting to the preceding joke, which again, is actually a really funny joke. This can also be extended to the subplot of the not-so-subtle political messaging. Now, when it comes to this particular topic, I've always been interested in the extended lore of the main series, because even though every game has stakes that could be considered world-ending apocalypses, we don't get to see how the rest of the world reacts to it, even though Dante and his crew have been hunting demons for decades. And the first episode really piqued my interest with the president being debriefed on these demons, and I was wondering where they were going with this as the season progressed. But as you keep watching, there's no subtlety, and there's no room for critical thinking required. It tells you to your face that Vice President William Baines thinks he's chosen by God and wants to wage his war on terror against the demons while screaming American Idiot by Green Day in your ear as a montage of the United States military invading the demon world and holding refugees prisoner plays out on screen. And just to be clear, the messaging itself isn't the problem. It's the delivery. It's funny because episode 6 showed me that they have the ability to write an entire episode around the show don't tell concept, where we can use context clues to fill in the gaps of Mary and the White Rabbit's origin stories. Yet 2 episodes prior, they had Dante discovering that he really is part demon, and puts the puzzle pieces together that make it very clear that Dante is Sparta's son. And then when he taps into his demonic power for the first time, he literally says, "I think this is the devil trigger. Also, I think I'm the son of Sparta." Like, what the hell is this? It's like the show thinks I'm too stupid to figure it out on my own, and it was driving me crazy as I was watching it. And guys, what is with the cursing? Specifically with Lady. I get that she's angry, and I get that she's bitter, because Scout puts on a performance with her voice and tone that shows me she is angry and bitter. So I don't need her to say the fuck, shit, damn, and hell words 43 times in the span of 4 hours to tell me that Lady is angry and bitter against demons. And yes, we counted. Cursing, clever cursing, is an art itself. I curse a lot, and I admit that, but even I know when to tone it down and use it in the right way for emphasis and situational humor. Lady saying something like "fuck you, Thumper" was actually pretty funny, but these moments are very rare, and it makes her so unbearable to listen to. I feel like I've already proven my point, but I can't end this section of the video without talking about the dialogue that happens at the very end of the show. As I predicted with my context clues, Virgil in his human form appears at the very end of the first season. It's admittedly a very cool moment, and an expected, yet fun cliffhanger for the next season. However, to introduce us to who will likely be the next antagonist of the show, and this interpretation of one of, if not the most iconic rival character in gaming, he has this monologue where he says,
"Our King Mundus grants you your freedom. Show him gratitude. It was Mundus who freed me from my own bondage. The Sapiens and their armies aren't aware of the storm they ride into. I am that storm. Bury the light playing." Cut to executive producer Adi Shankar.
This dialogue has already been memed to death online, and yeah, it's pretty easy to point and laugh at it, but given how I just spent the past few minutes dragging the dialogue through the mud, I'm going to do something perhaps a little unexpected. I'm going to defend this line. Don't get me wrong, it is very silly, but it seemed like they had this monologue written to set up that Virgil was this very poetic and sophisticated guy, while also referencing his iconic song. And let's not kid ourselves here. The main timeline Virgil would absolutely say something like this. And hell, that exact line in the song was based off of something Arkham said in Devil May Cry 3. However, because Bury the Light has become a meme in and of itself, it just didn't hit the way that I feel like they thought it would. Having Virgil literally saying he is the storm, with the "I am the storm that is approaching" lyric playing immediately after, just gave DMC Twitter more ammunition to pull with these hilarious screen grabs. Because if he had said literally anything else, no one would have complained about it. They had the right idea, but the execution just fell flat. And that last statement really summarizes my thoughts on some of the characterizations as well, mainly with the supporting cast and side characters that were taken from the video games. Now, I want to be clear. I'm fine with changes to the original source material, as long as it's in service of the story. And with this being a new timeline, I wanted to see something unique and fresh, and not just a one-to-one adaptation of the games. So the arcs with Lady and Dante, I'm mostly fine with, and I like how they progressed throughout the show, up until the very end where it majorly jumps the shark. Even with Virgil, I'm very interested in seeing this new take on the character, who appears to be brainwashed and willingly siding with Mundus, as opposed to being a slave forced to do his bidding. And I think the best character in the show, without a doubt, is the White Rabbit. He has a surprisingly tragic backstory, and his motivations are not only talked about throughout the show, but are fully revealed alongside Mary's backstory in episode 6, which is being raved as the best episode in the entire season. However, there are a handful of other inclusions in here that were placed simply because they were from the games, and doesn't do anything to make them interesting in this universe's interpretation. The best example that I can give is Agni and Rudra. In Devil May Cry 3, the thing that makes these two so memorable is their back and forth banter with each other. They actually seem rather polite, all things considered, but they have a job to do, and they can't let Dante just pass by, so they have to fight him. But in the Netflix show, they're just big grunts that don't serve a purpose other than being two big demons for the crew to fight. The same goes for Cavalier and Echidna. You could replace them with any other random high-level demon, and nothing changes. Which is funny because I felt the opposite about Plasma, who becomes a very memorable piece of the show with a lot of screen time and a lot of great moments, and is given a very sad ending where he sacrifices himself to get revenge on Darkholm for slaughtering his people. These types of characters are the ones I wanted to see more of in the show, and this is all given to a random enemy from DMC 1. So to answer my original question, was Devil May Cry on Netflix worth the wait? Yes, it was, but it left me very mixed. And it's really unfortunate because this show has a lot of potential to not only be a successful series on Netflix, but also showcasing everything that makes the original series so special. I found that it starts off really strong, but as the show progresses, I felt myself enjoying each episode less and less than the previous one. I think most of, if not all of the best moments of the show involve Dante in some way, and it hasn't gone unnoticed that it sometimes feels like he's a side character in his own show. It has its moments, and I was still really enjoying it overall on my rewatches, but the characterization of the iconic characters in the series, and the writing especially, as well as some other issues I stated earlier, hold it back quite a bit for me. This technically isn't a review of the first season, but if I had to give an official rating, I'm gonna have to settle on a C+. There's a lot I liked, but a fair amount could have been changed or tweaked to make it even better. I'm very interested to see what their angle is for the next season, and as I was finishing up this script, it was actually announced that Season 2 has officially been greenlit, with over 5.3 million people watching the show in the first week alone, which I am very happy to hear. But I want them to please take the general feedback into consideration. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of mixed feelings about this show, for various reasons. This isn't our first rodeo with a different take on the Devil May Cry series, so hopefully we can be a little more civilized in our discussion this time around. And at the end of the day, if you didn't like it, you can just ignore it. We still have the games, and we still have the main timeline. And my hope has always been that the attention this show brings will prove to Capcom that we want more Devil May Cry content, especially in the main series. And seeing the massive amount of posts online from people who are now playing the games for the first time because of the show makes me really happy. But let me know what you guys thought about the show down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more content like this from me, you can subscribe and follow me on all of my other social media platforms, all of which house similar content that I have here on this channel. And I want to give a huge shout out to all of my Grave Gang YouTube members listed here on screen. If you want to be listed on my next video, plus a bunch of other rewards, become a YouTube member today. And if you want to watch another video of mine, you can check it out on this side of the screen over here. Thanks again for watching. Look forward to more Devil May Cry content from me soon, and I will see you guys next time.